All right. All right out there, everybody. This is the Rhymes Media Group News Moment. And I thought I would take this time to talk about what I call the Trump Curveball. You know what the Trump Curveball is, especially on the issues of elections and voting and the media. All right. So we hear Donald Trump talking about voter fraud and that sort of thing. And it's a subject I've covered in great detail. Other people have covered it in great detail. I would suggest if you haven't, look at Greg Pallas's work, contributor for the Rolling Stone, investigative reporter. He's done a lot of work dissecting the U.S. election system and how it does actually include fraud of some kind. But let's talk about Trump's claim of voters voting over and over again. Now, I did a piece back in 2012, just before the excuse me, 2012 election. And so I wrote the alleged impetus for this change in policy in states such as Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Florida was that laws would prevent in person voter fraud at the polls. Now, does this charge stand under closer scrutiny and further research? Not at all. An analysis of 2,068 reported fraud cases by News 21, a Carnegie Knight investigative reporting project, found 10 cases of alleged in person voting impersonation since 2000. That's less than one case a year. With 146 registered voters in the United States, those represent about one for every 15 million prospective voters. Now, let's put that statistic in greater perspective here. The odds of being on an airline flight, which results in at least one fatality while flying with top 30 airlines with the best accident rates, would be 1 in 11.4 million. Okay? There are more than 40,000 malls in the country, and each one is open about 75 hours per week. If a person shot for 2 hours each week and terrorists were able to destroy one mall per week, the odds of being at the wrong place at the wrong time would be approximately 1.5 million to 1. Okay, you follow me here. You have a greater chance of getting involved. Those things have a greater chance of happening than in person, voting fraud, in person, personation voting fraud. Now, let's take this. 3,000 Americans die each year from lung cancer caused by secondhand exposure to cigarette smoke, making it a 666,000 chance to one chance. So if you look at that statistic as well, you have a greater chance of dying from cancer from secondhand exposure to cigarette smoke than you do of in-voter voting fraud, in-person voting fraud happening. So what is the real scandal? Because this is what Donald Trump does a great deal. He touches on a real problem like fraud in elections, but he's looking at an erroneous aspect of it. Okay? He does this quite a bit. And so people get on their high horse and they say, well, he's lying about everything. He's lying about the. No, there is a such thing as voting fraud. I'm going to read from Greg Pallas's report in Rolling Stone. And he talked about this before the election last year. He talked about this in his August, I believe, August, when was this Rolling Stone piece? August 24th, 2016. Now, his report starts off like this. When Donald Trump claimed the election's going to be rigged, he wasn't entirely wrong. But the threat was not, as Trump warned, from Americans committing the crime of voting many, many times. What's far more likely to undermine democracy in November is the culmination of a decade-long Republican effort to disenfranchise voters under the guise of battling voter fraud. The latest tool, election officials in more than 24 states have compiled lists of citizens who they allege could be registered in more than one state, thus potentially able to cast multiple ballots and eligible to be purged from the voter rolls. Now, the funny thing is that Ivanka Trump was guilty of this. I mean, this is really funny. Um, Now, the data is processed through a system called the Interstate Voter Registration Cross Check Program, which is being promoted by a powerful Republican operative, and its list of potential duplicate voters are kept confidential. So you don't know what this is. If you are the voter that they are doing this to, you don't know about it. Okay? Now, but Rolling Stone obtained a portion of the list and the names of 1 million targeted voters. According to our analysis, the cross check list disproportionately threatens solid Democratic constituencies, young, Black, Hispanic, and Asian American voters, with some of the biggest possible purges underway in Ohio and North Carolina, two crucial swing states with tight Senate races. Now, like all weapons of vote suppression, cross check is a response to the imaginary menace of mass voter fraud. All right? In the mid 2000s, after the Florida recount debacle, the Bush administration launched a 5-year investigation into the allegedly rampant crime, but found scant evidence of wrongdoing. Okay? Found no evidence really of this happening, but still, the Republican Party went into, defense mode here and started to create these programs like Crosscheck to deal with a problem that doesn't exist. All right? Now, I'm saying all this because I think that those people who are predisposed to believe that Trump is lying about something, he's giving you plenty of reason to say that and to think that because there are many things he has lied about. So that's not a wrong conclusion to come to. But when voter fraud or election fraud, excuse me, is being discussed, you have to not just reject the premise out of hand because some of us have been talking about this for quite some time, especially those of us in the Black community and people who are in the Hispanic community, people of color. We've talked about this issue for a very long time. So the fact that there is election fraud is not surprising because it's been a concerted effort to do this. It's been a concerted effort to suppress the votes in certain communities. So this isn't, news to me. So when you people who support Trump want to talk about his claim of election fraud, let's keep it in the realm of reality, okay? It's not totally wrong. There is election fraud, okay? And it happens a great deal in the party that he ran under, the Republican Party. Under the banner he ran under, the Republican Party banner. That's where you see these things happening. This is where you see them trying to address a problem that doesn't exist. And for those of you who are like predisposed to believe Trump is lying, here's the thing. Understand, deal with the actual problem of election fraud. Don't let it let you focus on the real problem. Don't just reject it because Trump said it. Let it bring you back to the fact that we still have that battle to fight. And this is what Jill Stein was trying to do. A lot of people lost. Oh, why is Jill trying to do this recount? What is she trying to do? Validate the Democrats? No. She was trying to address a very real issue: voter integrity or election integrity. That's what she was trying to get to. Were the votes counted as they should be counted? Were people purged from it? And that's a real issue. So we can't reject out of hand because we have a predisposition for or against any party, any political, operative, or any, elected official. Okay? All right. So now getting to the second thing of the Trump curveball. When Trump talks about the media, there are a lot of people who would consider themselves progressive and liberals and people who call themselves, part of the left. Is that they they say, well, that's one of the first things that fascists do. They try to discredit the media. They try to discredit the media. That's one of the first things they do, and that's true. They do. That's a very astute analysis. But what you forget and what you lose sight of is the mainstream media did plenty to discredit itself. The mainstream media many times has discredited itself by the stories they ran and then the stories they had to retract, by being stenographers instead of journalists, by falling for the Iraq story, by not looking deep into why Syria was being bombed and what was taking place there, not even talking about the fact that 26,171 bombs were being dropped in 2016 alone in 7 countries, not talking about that at all. And acting as if mainstream media isn't to some great extent beholden to corporate interest, and that all of what we call mainstream media is owned by a handful of companies. So when you look at what Trump is doing, you say, well, that's what fascists do. They discredit the media first. Well, yeah, no argument there. But you miss entirely the fact that the mainstream media, especially in this country and in other Western countries as well, has done a great deal to discredit themselves. They ran with this Russian hacking story, and they took the administration at its word when it says, yes, it's Russia. Russia hacked us, and even in their own report, they admit, well, we don't have any direct evidence that connects us to someone, to Russia hacking, but this looks like, it all has all the earmarks of what Russia would do. Well, that's not nearly good enough evidence to say, to accuse another country of interfering with another country's election process. Not like this country has done that to other countries, right? So that's the Trump curveball, is that he makes some totally fallacious, statements, but he's hitting on a very real subject. And what is a curveball? Curveball looks like it's coming straight at you at first. Then it seems at the last moment, if you're the batter, it takes that curve. It turns a little corner and you miss it. So this is what I don't want us to miss, and this is what's missing in our solidarity with people who would be agreeing with us, with people that we can find common ground with. Stop reflexively dealing with these issues and start to think critically about these issues. There is real election fraud. There is real reason to mistrust the mainstream media. And those two things may not have anything to do with why Donald Trump says you should, mistrust or think that something is happening. Something is happening. Mainstream media has shown that it can be tilted, it can be biased, it can be bought. Wherever you are on the political ideological spectrum, mainstream media can be bought on that spectrum. So let us not miss sight of real problems because of who's talking about the real problem. Donald Trump comes to some false conclusions, very much so in my opinion. But he is touching on real issues. Now, in the old fable, The Boy Who Cried Wolf, remember, at the very end, a wolf actually did show up. So let's try to meet on that common ground, on the things we can agree on the things that are true. And let's work from there. This is Edward Rhymes with Rhymes Media Group, and this has been an RMG News Moment. Thank you very much for listening. God bless and goodbye.